Hello and welcome to another episode of Dojo Live this Wednesday, December 6th, 2023. My name is Kim Lantis, and it's my pleasure to be joined today by co-host America Guerrero.
Hey, hello everybody. I
Hello,
think that
America.
it was like a delay, so
Oh.
It's
It comes with the nature of a live show, I think. But of course, the guest of honor, the most important person today is Brandon Zorner, who is Chief Sales Officer at Exact Payments. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really cool conversation as we talk all about embedded finance, kind of discovering what is and is not embedded finance, and more importantly, how to grow revenue with this. So if you're a SaaS company, this is particularly up your alley as well. But before we get into the specifics of today's conversation, Brandon, we'd like to get to know you a bit better. What's the Brandon story and what's kind of led up to your time with Exact Payments?
Yeah. So I'm based out of San Francisco and have spent a long time in tech and specifically fintech. So started my career in lending technology down in Bolivia, actually doing microloans for students. And then
Habla español.
Un poco, no tanto. No podemos hacer un podcast en español, pero para escuchar un podcast en español. But yeah, so I spent some time in Bolivia, and then worked for various technology companies, including Uber, and that's how I got into merchant payments specifically. So Uber was expanding their business and needed someone to handle merchant payments. They're a software platform, and that led me into what I'm working in now, which is platform payments, which is what Exact focuses on.
Wow, I love that. I love that story. And so let's dive into Exact Payments. You alluded to this a little bit, but what is the problem that your company is solving?
Yeah, so Exact Payments helps software platforms to embed payments. And there's a variety of reasons why a software platform would want to do that. But software platforms in general look like a company, almost like an Uber, except often something more like a Shopify or a Toast, which is focused on solving a specific B2B problem, and often providing a CRM or inventory management. And those folks have customers who we would call merchants. So if you're Toast, then you have a restaurant customer who is your customer, and that restaurant needs to accept payments. So a taco shop, for example, needs to collect payments from customers who come in the door.
All right, that's really great. So let's dive into the specifics of today's topic of conversation, America.
Yes. Oh, Kim, I thought that you were going to say the topic.
That's okay. It's all good. Go for it. How can
B2B? I'm sorry.
How can SaaS businesses take advantage of next level monetization strategies like embedded finance? So I think one of the first questions to kind of kick us off here is what's not embedded finance?
Yeah, totally. I think that's a good question, right? I mean, I think a lot of folks, particularly if you're in technology today, you have a common experience of what payments and finance should look like just from using standard applications. On the back end of that, it's always been pretty tough for businesses to set up payments and to do any sort of financial services, whether that's lending or insurance, et cetera, all the things that fall under embedded fintech. And so the first one of the early players and early movers in that space was Stripe. And so in online, Stripe's very common, great developer experience, et cetera. Square has done similar stuff in the US, and enabling small SMB customers to take payments. But prior to all of that, there was this model that was essentially a gateway and processor model. So that's actually how Exact Payments started as well. We're one of the largest independent payment service providers in North America. We do about $130 billion in payments volume today. So we move a lot of money. When in that model, we started as a gateway based out of Canada. We were one of the first online gateways to accept what are called card not present or online transactions in Canada. And for that model to work, if you were a software business that wants to accept payments online, you have to sign up with what's called a payment processor. So that could be someone like a Fiserv or a Chase or Moneris. And to go through that contracting process, you have to probably give them a call, get a sheet of paper sent over to you that says, hey, like, where are you processing? What type of processing are you doing? What's your average transaction size? You fill all that out, and then you physically mail it back to them. They'll take a look at it. potentially mail or fax you some paperwork that you would then sign. And so that's getting your like merchant agreement in place with a processor, right? Like very antiquated process. This still exists across payments today in the US and other
That's wild.
countries. Like we will still sign some of these contracts in the gateway side of our business. And then from there you go and you plug into what's called a gateway. So the gateway is the technology layer that connects you to those acquirers. And typically we call them legacy acquirers. It's folks who've been in business for a long time doing payment processing. And so on the gateway side of the business, technology integration to us, contract with us, or contract to whoever your gateway is. And that's this legacy payment model that's existed for years and is not embedded, right? What would happen there is a company like Toast, who again offers, or MindBody, or any of these companies that offer software services, they would tell a restaurant, go sign up for a merchant account, then go sign up a gateway agreement, and then our technology will connect you. And that would take weeks, months, etc., to onboard someone. That's the like non-embedded version of payments. Then you had this movement called payment facilitation, which was really meant to underwrite what were like SMB merchants. So small, medium-sized businesses that are, again, someone like a taco shop or whatever, that Square would come out with, Stripe would come out with and say, hey, we're going to underwrite you quickly, like within a day, same day underwriting. We're going to get you up and live processing payments, and you're going to do, thousands of dollars of transactions per year. So that's where this payment facilitation model came into play. And on the back of that, companies like Exact Payments have built out embedded financial products that allow payment facilitation as a service, not only for those like small taco shop, et cetera, SMB players, but for really large B2B enterprise customers that are getting the same level of service that they could get from anywhere else, just embedded through their existing vertical software providers. And they would not know anything about Exact Payments. We would be entirely white labeled on the back of that.
I thought that if it's a SaaS business, I imagine that there is a lot of technology around with the payment process, but it's not that way, right? So you're shifting that trend even in technology companies. So that's amazing. I didn't know that. I wasn't expecting that from SaaS companies with tech.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like the SaaS business model is great because you get predictable revenue out of it, right? Like you sign a SaaS contract, and you're incurring what are oftentimes monthly revenue. A lot of SaaS companies these days are getting pressure to expand their revenue lines beyond that like core monetization strategy. And part of that's going fundraising environment's a little bit more difficult. People want to be aware of their costs. They also want to boost what's called NDR, net dollar retention. And so these SaaS companies, they're oftentimes already doing payments, or they have exposure to payments through the customers that they have. But being able to provide payments or other financial technology, again, lending, insurance as a service, enables them to monetize that. So some of the first players to do this, you look at someone like Shopify. They're a large platform that allows someone to set up an online e-commerce business very easily. Shopify does 70% of their revenue through merchant services business. So they started as a SaaS platform. Now they do merchant payments for 70% of their revenue. That's huge, right? Toast is at about 80%. So you've got a big portion of these SaaS companies. They're no longer SaaS companies. They're really like payments businesses.
That's wild. It reminds me of, I'm always alluding to movies here on Dojo Live, but a couple years ago, I think the movie came out called The Founder, right? About like McDonald's, where it became I think real estate was really the real business behind McDonald's and not selling of actual hamburgers. Is that a good analogy for what I'm hearing here?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great analogy, and is very true, right? Like the business model is shifting, and the opportunity for monetization is a lot of times inside of these more subtle monetization flows that are less obvious. Everyone's used to paying, call it 3% for payments. If you also charge them 3% for payments, to some extent, that's not something that they're really going to notice. But there's a lot of volume going through there as well. So you can be processing billions of dollars in payments volume and collecting margin on all of that through embedding a white label provider like Exact, where we do all the work for you. You don't have to be skilled at payments compliance, for example, or onboarding a new merchant, underwriting a new merchant. Those are things that we take on. We take on reporting, et cetera, and you're able to monetize through the great customer experience that you have and the stickiness of those customers that already work with you.
That's wild. I'm curious in terms of the, the world increasingly gets smaller and smaller, globalization. How does this work in terms of like international business and the nuances of what you need to know in order to make sure that all of your customers are compliant?
Yeah, totally. So, from an international perspective, there's actually very few payment platforms that do payment facilitation and payment facilitation as a service that are operating in multiple countries, in part because it's really hard to set up that compliance infrastructure, right? So, getting banking relationships, getting all the connections into the right entities, et cetera. Luckily, for folks who are international, Exact has the ability to process across North America. So we do payments in both the US and Canada. We're one of the few providers that will do that. And oftentimes what entities in those areas will do is they'll set up the ability to process, and they'll accept international cards. So if you want to run an international card with someone like Exact Payments, you can do that. You can collect payments globally. But your actual entity, like the business entity that you've set up, would be in the US or Canada, and that's fairly common. So people are selling globally, and the card networks allow folks to do that through cross-border commerce.
Right, very cool. I'm curious in terms of like why the focus here is SaaS, right? I mean, every type of business in the planet receives payments in some way, shape, or form. But why is this particular niche what you've kind of focused on, and how, if we could go a little bit deeper in this idea of making money on making money?
Yeah, totally. So I think like the initial businesses, and I think you'd mentioned this maybe earlier, but I'd worked at Uber when I first started in payments, and so Uber is a platform that embedded financial services to enable a customer use case. So people are very familiar with Uber as a product. A lot of these SaaS companies, folks are less familiar with, right? So if I talk about Toast, or if I talk about Shopify, if I talk about House Call Pro, which is in like they help field services, so plumbers, HVAC technicians, this is a tool that these folks use. Those are customers, or people are less familiar with that because it's not a consumer facing brand, right? But these SaaS companies are doing really significant revenue on SaaS fees, and then they do have a payments use case for all of their clients. So again, going back to someone like Toast, if you set up an online or if you set up a restaurant, you need to accept payments both in store, and you probably want to provide some sort of like delivery or takeout, and then you're going to be providing online payments as well. And so that extends to all the spaces we play in. What we typically will do with these SaaS companies is we'll focus on folks who service somewhat of a larger customer set. So think like an enterprise customer, someone in the B2B invoicing space, for example, isn't really servicing like a restaurant that's going to sell a $5 salad. They're doing a $10,000 SaaS fee that's ran over a invoicing service, like one of our partners called Ordway, that will help with those invoices. And that $10,000 can then be monetized with, again, a 3% fee or some sort of credit card fee on top of it. So SaaS specifically is divided into what like horizontal. So Shopify is a horizontal SaaS company, which serves different industries, and vertical software, which is very focused on one industry. So someone like House Call Pro is in specifically field services, plumbers, HVAC, etc. Toast is in restaurants. We work with folks called Continue to Give. They do non-for-profit. There's a bunch of different industries that you can dig into, and each of those has specific like nuance to their use case. So the nice thing is these softwares have come out to help in an industry with really specific use cases, really specific flows, and gained a lot of customer trust through that process. So now you've got a tool that your whole business is running on, your whole business is reliant on in vertical software. And you're like, hey, look, I also want to be able to process payments. Why can't you just do that for me through one provider? And then that's where this becomes very obvious is, okay, well, let's provide the payments without having to do the regulatory and compliance work, et cetera. Exact Payments will do that for you. And you still get to monetize and create that really excellent customer experience of onboarding someone seamlessly, enabling them to accept payment from their customers without being at risk for non-compliance, et cetera.
I'm thinking that
Everyone
this
wins.
tech, it could also apply its payment system with DaaS, with data as a service. I'm thinking, for example, a rate shopper in the hospitality industry, that they do have like a platform and they compare prices in the hospitality industry with hotels, OTA. So that could be another path, right, in the future.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there are examples of folks who are doing that. So Beyond Pricing is one that's in the hospitality price industry, but they help like independent or like hospitality groups tell how they want to price functionally their let's say if you wanted to stay somewhere over the holiday weekend, then they would help you find the right price point to advertise to customers to get more folks staying. So that is a service folks definitely plug into a lot of these vertical software companies and then have access to the payment flow if you're working on pricing or inventory management, et cetera.
What does that nuance or making sure that you're also keeping up with those nuances of each vertical with exact payments? I mean, because you're not vertical specific, right? Which is beautiful. But what does that look like? I don't know, internally for you, or like as you grow, as you scale, what pieces are constant and what pieces do you have to kind of really adjust to each client that you're servicing?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And so exact payments will work across verticals. We do have some verticals that we really specialize in. So B2B invoicing, accounting, nonprofit, healthcare, some construction and education. Those are verticals where we've really put together a product to be more focused in those areas for some of the specific payment flows that they have. But will work with folks in any industry. And I think that some of that focus helps us scale and just provides a better customer experience. So an example again being the risk and underwriting needed to take on a $10,000, $20,000 credit card transaction is very different than what's needed for a $5 or $10 transaction. And similarly, the onboarding that's necessary for a merchant is different. So if you're onboarding these SMB merchants, it'll usually be like a fairly straightforward online flow, which we provide through either APIs or a UI that you can drop in. But a larger enterprise merchant, let's say I'm a merchant who's doing $100 million in volume, you're going to want a negotiated contract. You're not just going to sign up throughout some online flow, and you're going to want to talk to a sales rep. And so that's an area where Exact Payments has stepped up, and we'll provide our sales reps, our contracting and negotiation expertise. And so really those like enterprise customers are folks who we're able to service better than the competition, and that helps with scale as well. We've adjusted the product to enable a larger merchant to use us really well.
I love that. The ability to, really pay attention to the fine print, so to speak, and those needs. About the higher volume transactions, I mean, I'm guessing that's why you've specializes in a lot of these niches like construction. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is like my brother who's a contractor and he builds houses, but that's not the type of construction you're referring to. I mean, you're talking about mass scale, like the new MGM resort or things like that, correct?
Yeah, no, that's actually we can help with software platforms that would support folks like your brother as well. So someone who builds homes, it kind of depends on their role. You'll have a general contractor, you'll have folks who do specifically HVAC or plumbing. But there are software providers that both plug in on the home side, so like the development company building the home, and on the contractor side. So help a GC or a vendor like a HVAC technician get paid during the build process. And so what we would do is partner with those software platforms that are powering that home building experience and powering that builder's experience, and allow, for example, your brother to send an invoice out saying, hey, I just did $50,000 worth of construction work. Pay me for the $50,000 of work that I just did, using an invoicing platform. We would partner with the invoicing platform. Your brother would have no clue who we are. And would only see invoicing platforms branding as he runs his bills and whatnot.
What kind of integrations do you offer? I read virtual point of sales and also comprehensive developer APIs. Could you share more about it?
Yeah, so typically we focus on folks who are wanting to do online transactions. And we do have a card present offering that we're rolling out here in 2024, which means that you could physically swipe a card and transact with us. But for now, really what we're focused on is online transactions. And the integrations that are available are an onboarding module, which allows you to onboard new merchants. So bring on we'll start using like your brother as an example. So bring on a new contractor or someone who's a home builder on your software platform, enable them with payments. So we have what's called Exact.js, which is a JavaScript that can be embedded inside of the software platform to shield folks from PCI compliance. You can't see the card number if you're the software platform. We're the only ones that see it, but we give you back what's called a token. So those tokens are encrypted and they represent the card number in some ways. So you can run payments using great payment methods: Apple Pay, Google Pay, PayPal, and then we'll manage the payouts as well. So the contractor needs paid for the work that they've done. So they'll charge $50,000. You need paid as the software platform for managing that experience. So we'll give you your portion of the revenue share, and then we send the appropriate amounts back to the networks and the card issuers as necessary. And that's essentially a cost basis for running the transaction. And then the last thing that we'll do is provide reporting. So there's a reporting module that allows you to either run API or UI based reporting. And that's really, I'd say, like one of the other main touch points that a customer, a merchant's going to care about. Like your brother, when he gets paid, he wants to know how much he's getting paid, what days he's getting paid on. Lee wants to make sure that all the transactions and invoices, the invoice numbers match up to the amounts that he gets paid, so you can reconcile those amounts. And so those are the things that our software platform will provide on the front end. On the back end, we're doing that automated reconciliation. We're fighting chargebacks for folks. We're doing fraud screenings on all of the transactions. So those are things the customer would never experience, but are core to the product feature set.
That's fantastic. We're kind of coming to the final few minutes of the show today, and I kind of want to loop it back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. And this is just legacy systems and the way things were, and in a lot of ways still are, functioning in the world of finance. What do you think needs to change? What would you say is the most urgent thing in the world of finance, fintech in particular? Like, what does that future look like for you? What's the direction of where this all needs to go and is going?
Yeah, so fintech is interesting in that like technology adoption is really difficult to do in the ecosystem, or it takes a longer time because of all of the regulatory and compliance and different technologies that are built on top of each other. And so really what's needed is a lot of collaboration between all the entities in the system, and that regulation, for example, exists for a good reason, right? Like popular these days is a lot of the crypto stuff that's going on, and you've seen big players in the space, whether it's Sam Bankman-Fried or CZ, get in a lot of regulatory trouble for doing things that have hurt consumers long term. And you want to be able to avoid that. So again, play nice with the regulatory components of things, which are quite important. But play nice with all of the players that in the ecosystem that provide large scale processing, but also provide like a customer experience that's really great, so that someone can walk in to a store, pay online with just Apple Pay, and never even notice that they're transferring over their payment data, right? So I think the most important thing is for us is partnership, and we've built a strong company culture around that. So the company from its very outset was built on partnership with large channel partners who distribute the product. And we've continued to hone in on partnership with now SaaS companies that and help them to move things along. But ultimately, the entire ecosystem is built on partners. So we have bank partners on the back end that give us all of our licensing at a bank level. We have processing partners who we partner with as a payment facilitator. On the other side of that, our partners are these vertical software companies, and their partners are merchants and businesses like your brother, who's a contractor, and their partners are people who are buying products from them. So it's a large ecosystem of partnership where we all have to be collaborative and work together. And that's one thing I would say I actually appreciate about Exact's culture, is because of that, ethos of partnership and whatnot. We've been in operation since the 90s, and throughout that entire time period, something we've really leaned into is support and enabling folks through our teams who do support. So some of the folks in our support team have been with us for 20 plus years and really enjoy helping customers solve issues and working through problems together.
Wow, I do love that partnership culture and aspect of the Exact Payments ethos. I'm curious, kind of going to lean it toward you now in these final few minutes, Brandon, as an individual, as a CSO. What are some of the strategies that you've utilized as a leader to help nurture said partnerships and also just get Exact Payments in the forefront, as, like you said, not this this customer facing product, but I feel it's even harder area to sort of break through in when you're not, visible. How do you go about making or how businesses understand that a product like Exact Payments is a necessity?
Yeah. So I think in terms of like helping, I think everyone already understands that they want to be accepting payment. Their customers want to be accepting payments. Like that's something that's very core for any business. If you want to get paid, you have to accept payments. So that's a very easy point to identify with. I think few people realize that they can create a better payments experience. So better onboarding, better acceptance, higher authorization rates, all those things. And so that takes somewhat of a conversation with us, is like helping people understand that that's a pain point that can be alleviated. But we, outside of that, those conversations are really just us getting an in-depth understanding of the business. Like you were saying, each of these verticals is very nuanced and has specific stuff that they need. And so my job and my team's job are to sit down and really understand. Like I was working with someone in the education space recently, and I went to each of the school's websites that they work with today and tried to use their product, right? Like, how do I actually get billed from a private school? And really sitting with a customer, understanding their flows, understanding their customers is the best way for us to help.
I love that. I think the dedication of really putting the work in at the start, and even if there's not a guarantee that the business will move forward, is really a way to kind of distinguish, right, your service from and other companies out there.
Dedication, partnership. I'm curious if there are more values that you can share with us.
Yeah, totally. So we actually we went through like what we call the values refresh fairly recently. But in terms of company culture and values, one that really resonates with me is we own the buck. So we have a strong sense of ownership at the company, and like in some software, that might not be as relevant, but in payments, if like someone pays you or someone tries to pay you $100 and we send you $99, you're going to be furious about that. Like it's not you don't want to be missing money for a business, and it impacts operations and all these things, right? So we own the buck is like really important for us because we take ownership over each of the dollars that move over our platform, and each of the individuals on the team really understand that at a deep level. So you plug into the system works, you get the right amount of money. That's something that most people take for granted because it oftentimes happens. But if it doesn't happen, you're gonna realize that, and you're gonna wish that you were working in an environment where everyone had that level of accountability.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing your time with us today here on Dojo Live, your personal expertise as well as the expertise of Exact Payments. We, of course, wish you and your team nothing but success as you move forward.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, America. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Stick around for just a minute as we go off air. But before we do, we'd like to remind our audience of what we've got coming up for tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow we're going to have a conversation with Andrew Bartolo. He is the CEO at People Leader Accelerator and Series B Consulting. The topic is going to be quite intriguing. Tech employees are in crisis. How can tech leaders be more strategic? Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific.
That's right. See you then, and take care, everyone.